Dr. Dreadful Food Lab.
The murder of an eccentric millionaire was not entirely a surprise. He flaunted his wealth and cared little about personal security. The evidence clearly indicated robbery, but investigators wondered if there was more.
It was insidious. It was beyond diabolical. It's one of the strangest and cruelest crimes I've ever heard of.
At 33 years old, Michelle Baker was ready to settle down, get married, and start a family. Her dreams were soon realized when a girlfriend introduced her to a soft-spoken new doctor in town.
I was the happiest woman in the world at that point. I mean, he was every woman's dream. He was very successful, very good-looking.
His medical practice consisted primarily of cosmetic surgery, which he performed in his office.
He wasn't running some kind of fat farm or something. He was a real live doctor with credentials and a background.
Bright, aggressive, works, smart, but has this insatiable appetite for power, control, crushing people.
He was also an entrepreneur.
He's always been different, and he just came up with this idea. I could say off the top of his head, but...
I remember laughing about it. It was subject of many, many, many jokes around, you know, the family and even when he was around. But he was dead serious about it.
He always carried large sums of money and didn't care who knew it.
He would joke that he would have several thousand in this pocket, several thousand in a pants pocket, and a couple more thousand in his back pocket, and he generally did.
Just after dawn, neighbors heard gunshots.
Probably about 4 or 5 shots, then a break, and then maybe about 6 more shots.
When police arrived, they found the front door off its hinges. The windows had been shattered by bullets. Inside, the officers found he had been shot twice in the back of the head with a .22 caliber pistol. But if the motive was robbery, the perpetrator had not been entirely successful.
After the homicide, they found $133,000 in cash hidden in the house, which that by itself was such an attention grabber in this community. I mean, that was one of the most unusual things about the whole incident.
Investigators were baffled, but they suspected that the victim's dog had witnessed the crime. But his 3-year-old husky, Keisha, was missing. Sharon Zachary lived next door and acted as his caretaker.
Sharon Zachary had become almost like a daughter to him. She would take care of him, she would look in on him, she would come and visit him.
She walked into District Attorney Mike Harson's office and said, "The dog did it." While Harson was skeptical, he told Lafayette Police Detective Jim Kraft to check out her story. The story was hard to believe.
Oh, he loved his dog. His dog was his life. She was his baby.
She had a lot of hamburgers, a lot of pizza, hot dogs, things like that. I think she ate mostly people food. She was very spoiled.
Then, in the forensics lab, scientists found what appeared to be a partial print, similar to those caused by animals when pressing their noses against the glass.
The pictures looked like that a dog had been involved in this death.
The suspicion was murder. The primary suspect in this case was 3-year-old husky Keisha, whose street name was Scooby. Police soon learned that a dog matching Keisha's description was found a month earlier, wandering aimlessly several miles away.
She was just standing in the middle of the street, dazed, looking around like, where am I? What am I doing here?
Police took Keisha's nose print in the same way they collect human fingerprints. Each dog's nose print is as unique as a fingerprint, but the fabric was textured, which made any kind of print analysis impossible.
The print was almost invisible. Even to a trained eye, the ridge detail was very faint, and we had to really study it.
There was ridge detail on the print, but in my opinion at the time, I didn't think it was very much. I knew if that's all that we would ever have, and it could not be enhanced in any way, then we wouldn't have much of a case.
There were no physical evidence. None. There was zippo, zero, nil, nada, nothing.
With no murder weapon, no witnesses, and few leads, it was going to be a difficult investigation.
With no clear suspects, at least none that we're being told about, the Sheriff's Department is turning to the neighborhood and asking anyone who may have had any information about what happened here to give them a call.
Then, investigators came upon a possible clue. Police found a plastic bag with a blood-stained leather jacket inside. Inside the jacket, investigators discovered even more evidence. 20 brittle white hairs. Microscopic analysis confirmed that the hairs were from an animal, but there were no roots attached, so nuclear DNA testing was impossible. But they were able to extract mitochondrial DNA from the hair. Joy Halverson, a California veterinarian, specializes in animal DNA. When she compared the DNA from the hair to a sample of Keisha's hair, she found, to everyone's surprise, there was no match.
I was shocked.
So shocking that investigators had difficulty believing the results.
This is such a logical suspect. They ask that it be tested again.
The results from the second test were the same.
The DNA come back and DNA doesn't lie.
There was no match. The possibility of a dog attack was never presented to the jury. With that, the case went cold.
The townspeople were very upset. I think anytime you have a case that goes unsolved for a long period of time, it has even more of a dramatic impact. It's frightening for the people in town.
Homicide cases are never truly closed, but the investigation continued with little progress. Then, incredibly, investigators got a break. Constable Roger Savoy thought he had an answer. While police processed the crime scene, Savoy recalled that he saw a cat, but it wasn't just any cat. It was a pure white one, a cat called Snowball. Savoy also recalled that the cat rubbed up against his leg during his visit, leaving a number of white hairs on his trousers. Hairs that looked identical to the ones found in the bloody leather jacket. Investigators now wondered whether there was any way to prove scientifically whether the cat hairs on the leather jacket belonged to Snowball. Police believe the leather jacket was the key.
If we could prove that it was this particular cat's hair, the job was to find someone that could do this type of testing.
Savoy made hundreds of telephone calls and found, to his surprise, that forensic testing on cat hair had never been done before anywhere in the world.
I'd be able to do some DNA testing for us.
But he was fortunate enough to come across Dr. Stephen O'Brien.
Well, the constable said to me on the phone, Dr. O'Brien, I would like very much to know whether or not the hairs that were in the lining of the jacket, are those hairs from Snowball?
Dr. O'Brien asked police for a blood sample, but this was more difficult than expected. Snowball wasn't at all cooperative.
It took approximately half an hour from chasing the cat from under the beds to every room in the house until it was almost like the cat knew that we were taking him in.
After finally capturing the cat, Snowball was taken to a local veterinarian's office for the necessary blood sample. The DNA profile of the hair found in the leather jacket was then compared to the DNA from Snowball's blood.
We got a very clear match between the genotype of each of the markers in the hair to each of the same markers in Snowball. And the only way that that could have happened is that they came from the same cat.
Was it possible, because of inbreeding, isolation, or just plain feline promiscuity, that another cat had the same genetic profile as Snowball? If so, the DNA match would be useless. Blood samples were taken from 20 cats and sent to Dr. O'Brien and his team. The DNA profiles of these 20 cats showed a rich genetic diversity. The chance that the cat hair found on the leather jacket belonged to a cat other than Snowball was estimated to be 1 in 70 million.
Roger Savoy told me he went down to the house and read out the rights, the cat's rights to the parents. And I said to Roger, what did the cat say? And he said, meow.
Although Snowball denied owning the leather jacket, police found this photograph. In it, he is wearing a jacket identical to the one found at the crime scene.
Well, actually, he has no defense at all, except to say I didn't do it.
The jury deliberated just 15 minutes and decided upon the death penalty.
After listening to his whole story about what happened, I literally went home and told my wife that I felt like I'd just met Satan. I almost stopped on the way home and went into a church that I didn't belong to. It was the most unsettling thing that I've ever been through, to listen to that.
There's an old saying with the RCMP, we always get our man, but this case we had to go to say we always get our cat.
The case is among the most celebrated in forensic history because it is the first time that animal DNA was used to convict a murderer.
Once the Snowball case became well known among the forensic community, I would say about once every 2 weeks I would receive a phone call from a police department that was investigating a cat where a animal hair had been left behind, and they were asking us to help them.
T.S. Eliot penned these lines in his old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. You now have learned enough to see that cats are much like you and me. We've learned that applies to their DNA too.